Hey, Steve.
Hello again, Joe.
Nice to see you again. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah. It's becoming a bit of a regular thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't believe we've got to episode 4 already.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone's listening.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm certainly really enjoying it. They've been really interesting conversations so far.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely learned things from you in just 3 episodes.
Yeah, and me from you as well, vice versa, completely.
And hopefully there'll be more to learn in episode 4.
Yeah. So we've been talking quite a lot as we've been preparing for this episode, and originally the title for this one was Professionalism, Process and Jazz, picking up a theme from which was mentioned a few times, especially in the first 1 or 2 episodes. But I think we've come to realise that there's just too damn much to get into one episode.
There's a lot.
So we're going to split this across 2.
Yeah, I think we could probably talk for hours about, especially process for me, and the jazz bit. And I'd rather give that the time that it needs rather than just trying to cram everything into one short episode.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to take the first 2 parts of that in this one, professionalism and process, and then in the follow-up episode we'll talk more about the jazz part of it. And obviously process is a gigantic subject for delivery principals, chief delivery officers. So what we'll be talking about in the second half of this episode will be more of a kind of a hand-waving indication of why process, and the impact of process. Whereas in a future episode, we'll dive in more deeply and have a bit of a more thoroughgoing attempt at talking about processes that we've worked with, that we've liked, things we've found that fail, things that nobody talk about. So let's crack on, I guess. So the first aspect then, professionalism. I wanted to talk about this because it's, I think, one of the words that doesn't get picked up very often in this area. That one of the things that we're trying to do in delivery leadership is to augment or grow the professional dimension of the business. Everything all of us do in whatever field we're in should be professional. We're all highly competent, capable experts in our own fields. But the role of a delivery principal or chief delivery officer is bringing all of that together into one part that all works in close synchrony with each other. But Steve, I was wondering whether, what your thoughts are really on what professionalism feels like. What's the point of professionalism within the business, and why, as a business, I know you've worked in businesses that mature and have matured and have grown through stages of growth. What you're doing as the delivery leader, as the business is maturing in growing professionalism?
For me, it's been about tying those different aspects together. So you've got the team, you've got the business, and you've got the client. Trying to align all 3 of them. So obviously your business has got, has its own objectives, it's got its own direction, it's got its own plans. The team is operating within that. Team's operating for the business, and at the same time it's also operating for the client. And then you've got the client. The client has its own goals, objectives, particularly for they're working with you on a particular objective to develop a product or a service or whatever it is. And, as the chief delivery officer, you're accountable for sort of pulling all that together, giving it direction, having the confidence in what it is that you're developing, you're building, or what your team's building, and then passing it on to the client to give the client the confidence that you've got things under control and everything's heading in the direction that everybody's expecting.
Yeah, really nice. I like that. That confidence is definitely a real strong part of that. The confidence, as you say, all the way through the service delivery team or teams, through the service delivery unit within the business. But especially, I really like that focus you've got there of giving confidence to the client, that they know that having hired you as experts, that you're going to do what what they expect you to do, or even better, help them to achieve whatever that outcome is as well.
Yeah. And I think, given that confidence, you need to be starting that from day one. When you sit down with a client, um, you're essentially taking them on a journey with you. You don't want the client to be dictating the way that to be dictating the ways in which you and your team deliver. You've done this hundreds, thousands of times before. The team has got very well embedded processes and ways of working, and you need to stick with that because you know that those processes work. So you need to be taking the client with you rather than the client trying to then dictate how you're going to start reporting, how you're going to start delivering, when certain things are going to happen. But that's when that confidence comes from. I think you need to sort of exude the confidence with the client, and let them sort of just follow you.
I think as well that there's another dimension, especially in growing businesses. The second dimension, which connects with that confidence, which is about bringing calmness as well. You're kind of the still calm in the middle of the maelstrom sometimes,
Yeah.
especially as the business is when it's growing very, very fast. I was thinking of a couple of conversations I had earlier in the year with chief execs of digital agencies, very large digital agencies, several of which spoke about moments when their business grew really quickly, and how that caused them some, some significant challenges. You never want to turn down client work, but when you get three or four or five of them, one on top of the other, it can create kind of a sense of panic, really. How do we service all this sort of stuff, especially if you're a team of, 50 and you get enough work for 200 or something like that? How on earth are you going to deal with it? And it can result in this kind of all hands to the pumps mentality or whatever. There's something about the chief delivery officer in the middle of that who can bring a sense of calmness into the midst of that intensity. The same thing happens, I guess, when there's a rush of cash being injected into the business and you grow very, very dramatically, which can be, create this kind of seismic dynamic change. And you want to, what you need in the middle of that as a delivery principle is calmness, that we know what's coming. We know how to deal with these challenges.
Yeah, I think you've got to present a veneer to the client, don't you? There can be all sorts going on behind. It's not about everything's on fire within your business, but you need to smooth things with the client. If you're going to be growing that quickly, if you've decided to take on the risks of 3, 4, 5 big projects all at once that you're just not geared up for, so long as you've got a plan, don't know what the plan is, but you'll have a plan, no doubt. And there might be chaos, a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes, but I think you still need to be presenting something, like I say, that veneer, that confidence to the client that they don't need to know what's going on behind the scenes. Essentially, all they should be presented with is what you normally present to them as a client.
Mm. And of course, the hope is that the maelstrom, the craziness behind the scenes, you're bringing order to that. And as a consequence of bringing order to it, you're finding those patterns, there's ways of working, the patterns of behavior that work well for your delivery teams, for your organization as a whole, where you can kind of codify them or turn them into, documented processes, documented practices that then become replicable and become consistent, become that consistency you need in the business to be able to do this thing time after time. You learn quickly in that process, in the middle of that busyness, that intensity, but turn that into something that's useful and practical, which brings consistency.
Yeah, and I think if you've already got some even semi-mature processes, if you're looking at taking on new business in a hurry and you know that you're going to have to grow, you should be able to sort of calculate how much you can grow with the team that you've already got and with the process that you've already got. So you know that you've got a runway of however many weeks or however many months. So there should be an element of calmness at least within that period of time that you can plan for, and then you've got a slightly longer term plan whilst you kind of ramp up to take on all of this new work as well. So, this there should be process and plans all behind this, which should then sort of, help you remain calm under pressure, to give you the confidence that there is a way out of this, a way through this, I should say, whilst also maintain, like you say, that sort of consistency in terms of the delivery of the projects to those various new clients as well.
Steve, that sounds rather brilliant. Sounds like we come up with 3 C's for what professionalism is all about. It's about
trademark it.
Yeah, absolutely. The book and the 5-point plan is coming out. 3-point plan is coming out soon. Calmness, confidence, consistency is what we're trying to head for with professionalism. I really like that. We got there by accident, which is really nice. So let's unpack it then and talk about what's contained within that professionalism. In your experience and in mine, the things that we've been able to kind of mentally focus on, or we're aiming to achieve in order to raise the bar of professionalism within the organizations that we've been working. I know that we're going to talk about process quite a lot in the second half of this podcast, but I know it's something that's very dear to your heart. And I learned a lot from you over the years about effective processes, but it's really tied to kind of ways of working. And I wonder whether you might have some thoughts you would share about kind of ways of working that you found really helpful in terms of professionalism and presenting a professional dimension to clients.
Yeah, I mean, processes, without doubt, they need to be there, but they need to serve a purpose. They've got to deliver value. You can't just have process for the sake of it. I think we need to avoid waste wherever possible. Be thinking of sort of lean terms all the time. Because there are, if you start just throwing processes in, there's a lot of risks. I'm not going to go through them right now, but there are risks to having processes in place. But we can save that for another time because there's a lot of risk there.
Yeah.
But I think, like I say, you don't want processes just for the sake of processes. I think sort of to deliver and add character, this needs to be part art and part science. So kind of as a CDO, I want assurances, that we're operating in as an efficient way as possible. That's going to reflect well on our organization. It's got to bake in value and continuously measure that value as well. I think you need to always be able to sort of look and sort of see exactly how you're performing. So metrics are a big part of this in terms of measuring the performance of your processes. I think you.
So just to butt in on that, you mentioned the word value there, and the thing I'm thinking of course, with value, and this comes back to one of the conversations I had with one of those CEOs as well, and is an echo of previous conversations. But the value there is 2-point, isn't it? It's that you are creating the value for clients, so you're seeing that they get the outcomes they want, or they're having those exceeded, or having them shaped in the best way through your expertise. But you're also creating value in the agency's standing. This is something I remember one of the CEOs I've spoken to, Karim Maruki of Crowd Favorite, he talked quite a lot about there's those 2 aspects of value all the time: value for clients, but value in the agency's standing as well. And from the outcome of whatever you produce for clients, your agency has done a good job, something you can be proud of, something you can trumpet to the world and raises your profile or your standing.
I think there's also value as well in terms of the environment that you're trying to create for the team. Because if you've got just a very strict process and the team are following steps 1 through to 10 every time, all creativity's gone. People are just following a process. And I think one of the risks that I wasn't going to talk about, but I'll just mention, I think is, don't assume that a documented process is going to work well every time, because, you get hit with different circumstances each time, and you need to be able to adapt. I think as well, I want the team to feel ownership of the processes, for them to feel like the reflection of the work that they do. And also the team needs to understand the why behind the processes as well, not just the
Mm.
steps, because that's where you sort of lose that creativity. Um,
And
you
it's
know,
so for you there, is that about making sure that the objectives of the organization of the business that employs that those team members and what the team are doing, that they're joined with each other? Is that part of the raising the bar of professionalism in the
it
business?
is. It's yeah. That's it's partly that. I think it's partly about bringing the right people in. Um, it's about creating opportunities. Let people know that that the personal development's not just going to stagnate in this role as well. There's opportunity
Yeah.
for the people that want to move up. They make sure that they feel like there's opportunities to kind of move around to try different things. Have that environment where you can try different things and sort of raise your game a little bit as well. And then
Mm.
hopefully, and all of that, it's all positive change that you're trying to make there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and if you've got overly sort of bureaucratic and strict processes, like I said before, you're stifling creativity. Whereas if you've got the trust and that agility and the openness, that's going to just empower the team and sort of motivate them, hopefully, to do a good job as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the process is not just about delivering it. There's this whole bigger picture that you've got to consider as
Yeah.
well.
So the dimension there of efficiency, isn't there, in that what you're trying to achieve in raising the bar of professionalism is that things just become that bit more efficient. You're noticing in the way that the delivery teams are doing their job, things that are unnecessary or creating overheads that they just don't need in the way, and working out how to clear them out of the way
Yeah.
so that they can be much more efficient in what they're doing. And that's partly as well doing good forecasting, financial forecasting, but also capacity forecasting, and
Mhm.
working out whether the velocity that individual teams and teams as a whole can achieve, whether you can sustain that when the 3 or 4 or 5 new brilliant client projects come in, or not, and doing the planning that's needed to make sure that that the right amount of money is going to come in, or the right effort is being expended to bring
Mhm.
that income in, and whether you're going to be able to keep going doing that, or whether you need to
Yeah.
where and when you need to hire.
Yeah. And quite often as well, I've had KPIs tied to sort of the tighter processes in some ways as well, so that we're always trying to be more efficient, reducing costs in some cases, increasing quality, speed to market. Individuals personal KPIs would be tied to those, and it just just in a way that we can maintain that direction, so everyone's pointing in the same direction or pulling
Mm.
in the same ways as well. So yeah, I think KPIs, in some ways, I am and I'm not a fan of KPIs, but they can be used for good.
Yeah, I get the point of them. I get why they exist. Sometimes they can be problematic if it's not the
Yeah,
right performance indicator, or if it's not key, um,
yeah,
or that it's becomes a false motive for what you're trying to achieve. Then it's
yeah.
problematic. One of the other dimensions of professionalism, which I've always found really important, and I know you and I shared this when we worked together, was a lot about clarity all the way through. Particularly, we worked on unusual degree of clarity with customers. We worked towards essentially full transparency, which wasn't just about understanding progress and status and tasks and burn downs and velocity and stuff, but it went beyond that with contract negotiations, so that the contracts
Mm.
that we had with clients were always designed to be win-win contracts. Everybody won, and all the
Yeah.
clauses in them were well designed. And I think we got even to the stage where we were making our usage, on projects transparent to the client, so they could see exactly how effective our forecast and our spend was. And we weren't
Yeah.
fleecing them, but we were delivering value all the way along the way. And clarity seems to be to me anyway, has always been that hallmark, really. It also allows the project team as a whole, and I'm incorporating both the team, the delivery team, and the customer team as one team together. The ability to understand where everything's at any stage, to be able to inspect it really easily, to be able to analyze it properly, make adaptations together as a team, so you're continually improving, which I know is it's very agile, of course,
Yeah.
in essence, but it's baked into a mindset, isn't it? There's that level of clarity that everybody together understands and owns where we're at. And if that's part of the sense of professionalism, I think that's incredibly powerful.
It just comes down to trust, doesn't it? You're
Yeah.
trying to build a relationship, and if you can build that relationship on trust, then I think you're a good way there.
Yeah, yeah. And then I just wanted to mention something about client experience. You've touched on it already in what you said a few minutes ago, I think. But I've thought a lot about how those processes, what the experience is like from the client side. Many of them should feel familiar if they've engaged with agencies or external businesses, whatever. They should feel, some degree of familiarity. But there's a uniqueness to every business. There's a character, essentially, an aura about that particular. Oh, this is the way you do it. A
Yeah.
familiarity and surprise at the same time. And I think there's some really nice curation around that tone of voice. I guess it's a reflection of the business's brand. Whether you're, say, very formal and official, or whether you're very matey and friendly and bubbly, or any one of any other combination. But that dimension of thinking about what the delivery experience is like, especially for clients, but also for the team members as well, is part of raising that degree of professionalism. It's a reflection, actually, of I mentioned that guy Karim Maruki, the CEO I've been talking to recently. His background was in Madison Avenue, very, very big global advertising brands.
Oh yeah.
And he said that he'd when he'd approached building his agency business, the mantra he'd had with it and he'd worked on with his delivery personnel was, we have to make this the best client experience possible. What does that look like for our business within the confines of our personnel and our approach to things? But I found that really helpful for him to kind of put words around something which I've felt for ages. Yeah, I really gelled with that.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, it's your job to kind of package that up in many ways, because you're going to have to adapt depending on the client. Whether you've got quite like I say, like quite a matey relationship, whether it's a bit more professional, bit stiffer, more commercial, um, and it's how you bring together sort of the combination of the ways of working, the people, the metrics, and then obviously how you communicate that back to the client. We know that we've got these solid processes with these ways of working. Like I said before, we're delivering the product our way, and that's a way that we've defined probably over years, or at least it's the result of years of experience, even if it's not within that one business. And then if we get that right, then the client should be happy to join us on that journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Which might sound a little bit wishy-washy, but you need context as well. So it would make sense in the context of the client that you're with at the time, in terms of what that ride looks like.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We've all experienced some of those rougher rides at times.
yeah, yeah.
You've got to be able to adapt.
I just wanted to return back to something we kind of touched on a little bit, but that thing of hypergrowth. And I think as CDO, it's a really important thing to be aware of, or to be conscious of the reality of it. As I was preparing for this, I thought through, I think, 5 or 6 close experiences, either directly businesses I've been in, or businesses I've witnessed, or been or taught, CEOs I've talked to, who have experienced hypergrowth. And there's been different reasons why they've happened. Last business I was in was a SaaS product company, and I was there through seed capital and Series A investment rounds, and saw the effect that how I experienced the effect that had, and was part of the effect that I had. I was very proud of it, but the consequence it had on the structure of the business and the actions of the business, and what that meant for me heading up the client delivery unit. But I was thinking particularly of one of the CEOs that I spoke to earlier in the year, Alex Frison of Side, which is Europe's largest WordPress agency. He described to me a period when they had a number of big client contracts they won back to back in 1 year. They won 5 or 6 really substantial things. At the time, they were only a 35-person business. Really quite small relatively, and they had to scale up really, really fast in just that 1 year. And I think they went in a year from 35 to 100 people, and within a couple of months beyond that, within the next 6 months, they were another 20 or 30 people as well on top of that. And things for them moved at such a pace, and they were so intense. There's kind of jumping around from one thing another to another, but and then also carrying with them structures and practices that worked at 30, 35 people or whatever, and trying to do them at 120 people. Even back office things like HR and payment and all that sort of invoicing. It just didn't work for them at that big size, and yet they were moving so fast.
You find that some small organizations start off, they're running a lot of the business using Excel. And then soon as you get like 20, 30 people, it doesn't scale at all. So then you're adding to your problems already.
Yeah. And I think the antidote to some of that is a chief delivery officer, of course. Would think that, wouldn't we? Given what the podcast is. But I think in particular, it's the answer to it is a CDO, because the aim of the CDO in that professionalism dimension that we've just been talking about is about bringing harmony, that calmness, confidence, and consistency, those 3 C's that we talked about, bringing that all into that consistent tone of voice, that great client experience, spotting when there's replicated patterns or repeating patterns that can be turned into well-documented processes, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The CDO is the thing that needs to change, I think, to really help bring some order to that manic, seismic hypergrowth phase. And certainly that's what Alex at Side was describing. The change that they knew they needed to make was to hire someone specifically to look at that. They had individual delivery managers in individual projects, and that was fine for running the projects, but there was nothing to bring coherence across it. They weren't sharing knowledge. Things that they'd done as innovations in one area weren't being pulled across to other areas.
Yeah, it becomes a whole different beast, doesn't it? When you've got to start managing so much new work at the same time. It's very difficult to plan for something like that as well, because you if you've got X number of staff, you know that you can scale to this amount here, but to take it to those extremes, that's very difficult to plan for. Is that company still operating out of interest?
Yeah. It's still brilliant. It's world renowned.
And did they stay that scale as well? Did they?
Yeah. Which is, I think, largely credit to Alex himself as CEO and his intelligence in hiring a CDO at the right point to do the right thing. I was really impressed with him. He's a really impressive guy.
We need to get Alex and his CDO on here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and the interesting thing about talking to Alex, actually, I've just remembered, was that he recognized that they needed in the business was someone who came in with experience. They needed to hire someone into it. They couldn't just promote one of their existing delivery managers. They needed to hire someone who came in with experience. And certainly in my last experience, my last position, the thing that I felt confident about in moving with the business into that Series A round is that I'd done much larger projects previously, and I felt really confident that the delivery strategy that I had created and was then executing on was really scalable, because I'd already seen it working at larger sizes and was bringing that knowledge to a smaller point when I joined the business, that startup, knowing that they were intending to grow and that we would need that efficiency, that well-designed patterns as the business grew. And I think that's one of the really important things about helping to bring calmness, confidence, and consistency is having someone who's seen that stuff. Oh, it's one of these. I can bring that master builder kind of knowledge to the scenario
Yeah.
and say, yes, I recognize this. I know exactly how to deal with this already. Right. We've talked for quite a while on this subject. So I think for now, we'll bring this to a close. And in the second half, we'll come back and we'll talk a bit more about process and how process fits in with professionalism, what process has to bring to the area of professionalism. Let's take a pause. I'm back in a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello again.
Cool. So in the second half, we are going to pick up something that we mentioned a lot in the first half, but in to look at very specifically the thing that really conscious is at the heart of delivery principles life, but especially is the thing that is at the kernel of what professionalism is about, and that is process. Professionalism covers a lot of things, as we've already said, but I thought there's such a big subject, and we're obviously going to cover it in many episodes in the future. But I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about the why of processes, why processes are important, what the point of them is, what the effect of them is, and that sort of thing.
I mean, if you've got we've said a few times that your service is essentially, well, it can be your product, depending on the business that you're in. And if that's the case, then your service, it needs to be consistent. And the way that you get consistency is by bringing in a process and repeating certain tasks, certain activities every time you deliver a thing, whatever that thing happens to be. So,
yeah. So I think what you're saying there is that the part of the process is it's taking the way you do things as a business and saying, it's making it formal, I guess. This is the our way of doing things. This is not their way or that agency's way or this business's way. It's our way, and it has flavour that is distinctive to us compared with the last place I worked in or the next place I'm going to work in or things I've seen in the industry at large. This is the usness of this business.
Yeah, how are we going to get from here to there? So obviously somebody has sold product or service. We need to get from day one to there. And if it's the first time that you're doing this, you need to define a way of getting to there. You need a plan. There's going to be activities that happen on the way there. You're going to have roles. You're going to have some responsibilities as part of that as well. And that's going to form part of your processes. And then when you get to the end, like any good agile project, you're going to hold a retrospective and look back and say, how well did we do? Was our first effort good enough? Are there any sort of improvements that we can make? Did we get it completely wrong? And then all of a sudden you've come up with process version 2, and then you just start building on it from there.
Yeah. And so I guess it is in some degree a reflection of the personnel involved, the particular technical lead and design lead and so on and so on and so forth. Those particular characters and the needs they have in order for them to function at their optimum, and how those things match with each other, which is also then a reflection of the founders of the business, their intention when they set up the business and the character that they had. It's kind of melding all of that stuff and putting it into one thing and say, this is the way that we do those things. This is the way we, as you said, we get from A to Z, and the steps that we like to take along the way, and the way that retrospectives help us to reevaluate that and check that we are getting the best out of each other in the way we're doing it, or we've picked up bad habits which are problematic and need to be questioned and dropped or reshaped. But it's the way that we do things together.
And also, I think as a CDO, you need to know how things are operating in the business, how the delivery teams are delivering. You don't want to be part of these processes. You might be involved with them at the beginning, as you're helping sort of determine what those processes need to be, the checks, the boundaries that you put in place. And you might be involved as an escalation point, for example, but I don't think you need to be part of these processes. It's just about you being able to understand how the delivery works and then being able to communicate that to the client when you're having those conversations.
Yeah. So interesting thing that strikes me as I'm listening to you describing that, Steve, is that process of adaptation to those ways of doing things. Of course, both of us really get the whole agile planning, review and retrospective, and how that adapts. Sees that a natural evolution of things.
Yeah.
What do you feel about how to keep people on track? I mean, say a particular team finds an innovation in the ways that they work, which is a significant alteration or adaptation of the way that we do things, as it were. You can see the scare quotes coming out there, but the way we do things has an adaptation for this team. And if you as CDO find there's aspects of that are problematic, that are different from the character of the business, have you experienced that? How have you risen to that challenge, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in an organization before where we took on a project and it was to deliver an application for the client. But it was using technologies that most people didn't have. We certainly didn't have the skills in house at the time. So the way that we were going to approach that project had to change significantly. I've had other examples as well where some teams have come to us and said, they want to try a different way of working, and usually it's an iteration on an existing process, and that's not a big deal. But I've had people come to us before and they want to. It's a significant change. So it's just about having the conversation about what is it you're looking to change, why, what value could this create, and sort of understanding the risks around it as well, and trying to determine from that, is it worth the risk? Is there a like a toned down version of this change that you could make, and just trying to come to a compromise that sort of achieves something, or at least tries to achieve an improvement, because that's what the team are looking for, without having without carrying too much risk with it as well. So I think have a conversation with the team. As part of these processes, you put in boundaries because you want the team to sort of explore and try different things, and you don't want to lose that creativity. But by putting in boundaries, the team knows when they can't overstep the mark, and that's when they start to involve you and have that bigger conversation. And should we or shouldn't we? You make the decision there.
Yeah, what you're saying is making me think about another subject which we ought to come back to in the future, is the thing about setting standards and maintaining them. Because there's a dimension, I think, to which the CDO's responsibility is to say this is the standard which is appropriate for us as a business, and making sure we're keeping to those standards, whatever they happen to be on, clearly industry standards. But there might be other standards as well which are distinctive to us. If elements within the delivery team, if individual teams or people or whatever are wanting to add to that, the way you're describing things, what I'm thinking about as I'm hearing it is something we've reflected before about the importance of emotional intelligence in dealing with that. You need to give time to listen and think, what's the learning point here? What's the problem that's being identified that this person or this team or whatever is bringing something to remedy or to overcome?
Yeah.
Is it genuinely there? Is it a genuine problem? Is this a genuine solution? Can we incorporate it? And if not, why not? What else is going on? What we're trying to do is just see that the evolution is a healthy one that's adding or increasing the professionalism we were talking about in the first half of this.
Yeah. So just to add to that as well, I was just thinking that obviously the team has a narrower view of the world to the one that you as a CDO has as well. You need to understand that bigger picture, and you probably understand the consequences of decisions that the team's looking to make as well. So you've got their expertise in that particular area, but is there a knock-on effect? Is there going to be any regression elsewhere as well that we need to consider?
So the first element then of the why of processes is the way we do things and evolving that. Second element, clearly, and I know this is something which both of us really is very dear to both of our hearts, is reliable, repeatable, replicable practices, things that can be grabbed and just done with, and which kind of reflects what we were talking about in the first half about efficiency, removing some of those overheads and not having to think too hard about how we do things. We just get on and do them, and we have the tools and this and whatever that we have there. I know you've worked really hard at building some of those in, because I benefited from those earliest days of my career when I was a programmer, and I've used those a lot. Those kind of replicable practices to make sure that things just happen the right way. They happen the effective, the most effective way.
I think you have metrics. Metrics are a big, for me, it's a big deal, because without metrics, you can't really measure how you're doing, how the processes work, and so on. I mean, I've taken a few companies through ISO 9001, the quality management standard,
Yeah.
which to some people it's a very boring thing, but actually it doesn't. You can boil it down to something quite small. It's a very agile process, because it's about having some processes in place to achieve an outcome. You have metrics, and you're constantly reviewing how those processes are working, implementing improvements, measuring the improvements to understand the impact that they have. And that becomes your cycle. Very, very similar to agile. The steps that you take there, but it's about having measurable steps in place to kind of understand the progress that you're making. Are you making the right progress towards the targets that you've set? Because without those, you're singing into the wind, really.
Yeah, of course. And then, of course, the potential, if you've got replicable processes, repeatable things, then there's room for to explore automations. There's clearly loads of tools that can do a bunch of that stuff for you, but there might be other room for automations using in more innovative things.
Yeah, I mean, in a previous role, I took a lot of stuff towards automation. Whether it was building environments, whether it was building products, whether it was translations, and obviously AI as playing a big part in sort of shouting about this now as well. But yeah, I mean, automation, you take away all of those monotonous tasks that have to be done every time because reasons. You free up the team to do so much more. And now if you might have QA engineers, you don't want them sitting repeating the same tests time after time when that could be done in minutes by some automated process. Usually these people have got skills far beyond what you're asking them to do there. Get them involved in the more sort of interesting work. It helps maintain their interest in the role. It builds their sort of it can count towards their personal development as well. They can be exploring new tools, new ways. They can be doing more exploratory work. There's just so much more to be done once you can automate some of those tasks for the team. So you're building in capacity into the team as well. That speed to market, you can increase that as well. And it's a good way to reduce costs in many ways as well, which, they're the kind of the three things that most organizations are interested in.
Yeah. I worked with a technical architect who she had a really lovely way of saying, describing this sort of thing, that she said, I'm the laziest engineer I've ever met. I don't really like writing lines of code. And so I automate all the things I can automate to get rid of them, because I don't want to do that sort of stuff. What I want to do is play with new things and find out new stuff and learn more. And it was, I loved hearing her say that, and wanted every single one of my engineers in my teams to have the same kind of attitude. Mm-hmm. The point of writing automating all the things that you can automate wherever they are, in delivery management, as much as anything else, is to take away the mundane things, to make sure the intellect and inquiring minds of the brilliant people in the delivery teams can do their best work. And then I think the final thing of the why of processes is that being able to explain them to customers. They need to be really clear and obvious for customers to be able to follow, so that when you're starting a project, or in fact at any stage of a project, that the clients know what to expect when we're going to have this kind of meeting, this kind of event, that I know that in 3 days' time I'm going to have this thing land on my desk, because it's the regular pattern that happens. That explanatory power of really effective processes is really good.
And I think as part of that, explain to the customers, it's about explaining to the customer what their role and their responsibility is in the project as well, because you want them involved at the beginning, because you want them as well as the team to be buying into this project, making sure that everybody has the same understanding. Then you need them involved throughout the project as well. Usually at review time, you want to put this thing into their hands, start getting the feedback. So they've got a big, important role to play in this, and I think they need to understand it from the outset. So yeah, explaining this big piece, this big process piece to the client, it's a big part of this role.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really great way of thinking about it. Absolutely. There are roles and responsibilities within
Yeah.
the whole enterprise, definitely. And then you've touched on this a couple of times, just thought it'd be really good to put some words to bring it together. But the point of building these processes is so that the delivery principle kind of builds themselves out of it all. So that in principle, those systems, those processes, those practices are things that anyone could pick up, particularly other delivery leads, delivery managers, whatever seniority should be able to pick them up. Maybe in principle, anyone in the delivery team could be able to pick them up, if because of illness or traffic congestion or whatever. So, someone has to step in for a particular instance. But the idea being that if you need a change of personnel for whatever reason, personality clashes, say between a delivery manager and a product owner, or illness or whatever, you shouldn't have a different feel or a different experience moving across personnel. It should be coherent all the way along, so that explanatory power to customers and that customer experience, that tone of voice, they're all really coherent.
That also fits into this sort of we talked before, but sort of like emergency growth when all these new projects have landed. It may well be that you need people to take on different roles as part of that scale up operation, and to have the roles and responsibilities properly defined. That means that other people can't possibly step into those roles whilst you're going through the recruitment process as well.
Yeah. You've used the word a few times that these processes become like a product for the business. And I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it, which of course then means it ought to have the traits of a product in that it's clear and easy to use, it's adaptable, usable in multiple contexts, defined in such a way or designed in such a way to fit clear user needs. It's got feedback and review baked into it. Adaptation and improvement is a feature for it all. That's exactly what a healthy delivery process should be as a product for the business. And I think that's quite a good mindset for a CDO to take.
I keep banging on about this point as well. It's a product that the product should always be evolving as well. I think this is your product or your service, it never sort of ends, does it? Never comes to an end. Your backlog's never empty. And I think that's something that you need to maintain.
Yeah. We've covered loads of stuff as always in this podcast, but one thing I'd really like to talk about before we come to a conclusion is what happens when process gets out of control, when that pot gets to boiling point. And again, and the reason for picking this up is another one of those conversations that I've had with a CEO of a digital agency. This was Tom Wilmot, CEO of Human Made, who also, their business also went through a gigantic growth phase. They landed some fantastic client work in the news media world in the UK. They developed a very distinct product for that world, and they grew really, really fast, made a huge impact. But the consequence of growing really fast was kind of panic. The secret, the energy of their early phase that allowed them to win those brilliant clients resulted in a gigantic growth and chaos, as you would get from hypergrowth that we were talking about early on. And there, Tom spotted that. He told me they spotted that quite early on, and they worked to promote someone up in their business to help them professionalize quickly. The consequence for them is that they ended up kind of throwing a net of process over all of the things, which was amazing. It made them very professional. Clients loved them. But there was a challenge that then the process became king amongst all the disciplines in the business. And the effect on the kind of the innovation and the energy of the earlier phase of the business meant that it kind of got subsumed or made subservient really to the process. That overboiling process became really difficult for them, and they had to row back. He talked about remembering that secret sauce, and coming to terms with the fact that project management wasn't the reason for the reputation of their business. It was built on that secret sauce, that original energy, and they wanted to recapture that energy.
Yeah, I've come across that before, where where a company grew pretty quickly, and people complained, the delivery teams complained about, there was too much red tape all of a sudden. We've become too commercial. We've become too sort of big consultancy, and they missed the days of being an agency where you've got that agility and the opportunities that brings as well. So yeah, it's you can get it quite wrong, and it can be quite bad for the team.
Yeah, I wonder how they would cope if they were to grow, 3 or 4-fold more, having recaptured that secret sauce originally. Whether they were to carry on their growth, could they retain that secret sauce while still having processes that were fit for purpose? And the way Tom described one of the changes they made, and this gives me hope for the future of their business, and I'm looking forward to carrying on chatting with them and finding out over the years to come. But he said that they became once again outcome focused. So rather than focusing on the process was just a means to get to the outcome.
Yeah.
And that changed the relationship between the project managers and other members of the delivery team. It's a technology business, so front end, back end engineers and designers and user experience experts. It equalized that so that everybody's working together to the objective, rather than the lead delivery principal ruling the roost and everybody else being subservient.
Yeah, I've known as well where there's been too much reliance on the team. The team's always managed to, they'll get it out the door. It'll be okay. Certain people in the organization, senior members of the organization, haven't focused on the delivery aspect. They've only, like you say, they only focus on the outcome because the team will manage to get this outcome. But generally, it's not okay. That might stand up for some weeks, but very quickly you'll start to see things falling apart. And then to retrospectively try and adopt those processes whilst also trying to deliver at the same time, it becomes almost impossible, and you'll just see morale plummet. It's a really difficult problem to get out of once you're in it.
Yeah. And so what Human Made have been trying to work towards is that equal partnership, so that process and outcomes are humming along together with each other.
Yeah, that's nirvana, but unfortunately, sometimes certain organisations just see pound signs too quickly, and it's
true.
Yeah, but you need that big picture. I think without the big picture, things do fall apart, and they fall apart really quickly.
Yeah. So on that note, I think it's time to call this episode to a close. We've covered a lot today, as we thought we would, looking at professionalism and process. And next time we're going to look at jazz. So we've talked in particular about how professionalism is necessary for the business to raise its game, to create efficiencies and bring clarity, to deliver value for both clients and in the agency standing. And a lot of that is about client experience. We talked about the perils of hypergrowth. Sometimes it just happens through wonderfully winning lots of contracts, or through investment, or for other reasons. But it can lead to problematic things. One of the solutions to that is probably a good CDO. Of course, that's the answer we'd always offer.
Without a doubt.
And then we talked lots more in the second half about process, but mostly about the why of process, why they're so dear to the hearts of us as chief delivery officers, about the way you do things as a business, about making replicable practices, things you can explain to customers, And then finally, about the perils of overboiling process that's not in a proper partnership with an outcome focus. Steve, as always, a really great conversation.
Yeah, that's been a good one today. Enjoyed that.
And so we're going to come back and in the next episode, and we're going to talk about the second dimension of that. With that as the foundation, how do you then get the jazz, the creativity and the innovation and the improvisation?
Look forward to it.
Thanks ever so much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your conversation.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers, Joe.
See you again next time. Bye.